The Ahsoka season finally ended last night, and it was incredibly underwhelming. There will be spoilers. Sabine did become a full-on Force user. They've been building up to it all season, even though people were coping and in denial that they would actually have her become, I guess, a Jedi, or at least a Force-using Mandalorian. Shin and Baylan pretty much vanished for this finale. Thrawn and Ezra are going to make it back to the galaxy. Thrawn and Ezra make it back to the galaxy. Ahsoka and Sabine are now stranded. And this season could have been accomplished in probably the first 2-episode special if the story had been more tightly written. And by tightly written, I mean we wasted a lot of time this season. So let's get into what happened, because this finale was just the epitome of what Star Wars has become, where we get a bunch of mystery box garbage and no answers to anything, with promises that there's a big plan in place, and anyone with 2 brain cells to rub together can see that there's not. If you've watched the sequel trilogy, you saw how little they actually had planned. They had 3 different directors. They were doing all kinds of stuff. The directors were doing stuff to spite each other. They were just making their own movies. So there was no plan. And I don't anticipate this show having a big plan either. This to me is a bunch of, oh, we're going to leave a lot of things unanswered and we'll get to it eventually. If Ahsoka Season 2 ever gets made, which I'm personally not convinced that it will, or if you wanted to call it Rebels Season 6, that would probably be more appropriate. But either way, the viewership for Star Wars has gone down and down and down, and with these massive budgets for these Disney Plus series, I don't know if anyone really knows if these big budget shows are worth the investment for Disney. But that's a whole separate thing. So let's just get into the actual show. So we start off with Thrawn talking to Morgan Elsbeth. He sends 2 TIE fighters to go after Ahsoka and Hu Yang and Sabine and Ezra, which last episode they sent 6 to space and then 3, and neither one was enough. So why he's sending 2, I have no idea. Makes no sense. But he's a tactical genius, I guess. And Morgan Elsbeth, because of the deal with Thrawn and the Great Mothers, they all seem happy about the arrangement. So she gets some kind of witch magic force power up. And they also make her a magic sword called the Blade of Talzin, which is a nod to the Clone Wars. This Thrawn thing really is frustrating, because in the books, he borders on like unbelievably smart, like almost like a Sherlock type character, where he anticipates multiple things and has a preparation in case of failures or mistakes. And the reason that he loses is never because of him. It's because of arrogant generals or things that just couldn't be accounted for by anybody. But here, he just kind of seems like an idiot. He just keeps losing and being like, oh yes, it's part of my plan. And it makes no fucking sense. That's pretty much what's going to happen this episode too. And again, this episode makes the previous stuff so much worse for Thrawn. So here in the image that I just pulled up, you can see the blade that they made from their witchcraft, the Blade of Talzin. And Thrawn literally says to Morgan, I've seen many Imperial officers lose to the rebellion because of their arrogance. He says that a single Jedi foiled all his plans. Never again. And yet, he let Ezra live with alien hermit crabs for a decade. And at this point, we see that they have a bunch of TIE fighters in operation. The Chimera at the end of the episode is functional and can shoot. He has however many hundreds of stormtroopers, even though they're just kind of a joke now, but he still has them. So at no point did he take a few days or a week to just go kill Ezra with all of his ships and weaponry, and artillery, and soldiers, after he specifically says that Ezra is why he ended up in another galaxy. So it's just absolute nonsense. And I guess they just assume that people are going to forget the previous episodes, because that's the only way that you can justify having him be contradicting himself so blatantly. And it's infuriating to watch, because that's not even like a requirement for a tactical genius. It's the most base level of common sense. The one positive I would take away from this season is whoever did the music. The music has been great and unnecessarily epic all season, and I've really enjoyed it. I wonder if it's the same guy that did Rebels. I guess I could just look, but I'm not, because I don't care. I think his name was Kevin Kline, and there was some really good scores in Rebels. My favorite one, I can't remember the name of it, but it's the one where Zeb flies to his own galaxy, and you get this slow violin build up as they're going through unmapped hyperspace lanes. It's really awesome. And the music even here is really good. It's being wasted on terrible writing, and it's really frustrating. because all these big moments are being just undercut by the seemingly bored acting and the absolute nonsense decisions being made throughout the show. And this is not a huge thing, but it's really annoying to me. So the Jedi, the Witch, and the Warlord is obviously a nod to the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And at this point, Dave Filoni seems like he's writing for Family Guy instead of Star Wars. It's just like, how many things can I reference and give a nod to that people will see and hopefully clap their hands? Like, we've already got Ahsoka going from gray to white, which is Lord of the Rings reference. The way that the Howlers versus the Noti, or the alien wolf dogs versus the hermit crabs, was shot looked like the second Lord of the Rings movie. Obviously, this title is a nod to Narnia, and it's just throughout the show, all the samurai stuff. It's really annoying. I mean, maybe it would be cool in a better show, but the fact that this show is like mediocre at absolute best, and he's just doing all these references, makes me think that he doesn't understand anything and shouldn't be in charge of anything as far as writing goes. So then we go and we get something really dumb and something really good for me, where Ahsoka's ship is escorting the Noti toward Thrawn. So they're going like 5 miles an hour. And I don't really understand the purpose of that when they specified last episode that they were defenseless and pacifist. And in theory, they should be in a pretty big hurry to get to Thrawn to make sure that he doesn't go back to the main galaxy, which is all really stupid. But while they're doing this, Ezra is constructing a lightsaber, and Hu Yang is trying to give him advice. And he's like, I've been doing this since long before you were alive, which is true. But Ezra has always been kind of stubborn and done his own thing. And I do like that the lightsaber that he builds is a nice little nod to Kanan. And if you look at a Rebels comparison of the hilt compared to the one that he builds here, they're pretty much identical. So that's a nice little touch. And I like the dynamic between him and Hu Yang. But, you know, again, it's kind of surface level stuff that I have to praise because there's not really much to latch onto for character or message or theme or really anything. Here's what I was talking about. You can see the shape of it, and like the one side of the, I'm not sure what it's actually called, hilt is slightly longer, which is how Kanan's was in Rebels. And there's a little bit of stuff in here too about the relationship between a master and apprentice being challenging but worthwhile. And Sabine looks sad because we got off-screened her and Ahsoka's relationship as master and apprentice. Something that I'm a little bit bummed that we didn't see with the lightsaber was because they went with Ezra kind of imitating Kanan's, is Ezra's lightsaber in Rebels functioned as like a kind of stun gun slingshot thing and a lightsaber. And when he became really good at it, he could switch back and forth between them in a fight, which is pretty cool to see. And it's pretty unique for Star Wars. And we didn't really get that with this, which is a little bit of a bummer. It's not a huge deal, but I think it would have been nice. Like a nice addition to the lightsabers that we've seen throughout the live action stuff. We get this scene here of Ahsoka and Sabine kind of acknowledging that she screwed everyone over, like billions, possibly trillions of people, by bringing Thrawn back into the fold of the main galaxy. And this is a scene that, again, is frustrating to me because Sabine hasn't been really called out for her actions at any point. Her selfishness has been every step of the way the reason that Thrawn is going to come back. And Ahsoka ends up just being like, well, your gamble paid off, and since I'm your master and you're my apprentice, I'll take your side no matter what. Again, this is kind of a nod to the Clone Wars dynamic between Anakin and Ahsoka because obviously she felt like he abandoned her near the end. Well, near the end of her stint as a Jedi. It's frustrating when you put this into the big picture of Hera had no consequences because of nepotism and essentially government corruption. Sabine isn't really going to face any consequences because obviously Thrawn is going to be dead before the First Order is established, or he's going to establish it but then die. And maybe Sabine's going to die or disappear. We don't really know yet. And then Ahsoka doesn't even like lay into her the way that she should. And neither did Ezra, who threw away at least a decade of his life to preserve the rebellion and a new type of government that wasn't authoritarian. And all of this just kind of gets swept under the rug because Ahsoka's like, well, I'll be on your side even though you fucked up. And to me, this is just really, it's just really irresponsible and not good mentorship. I don't think it makes you a good mentor to just always have your pupils back. Like, I think a part of being a good mentor is telling your pupil, like, hey, you fucked up. You need to take responsibility. You screwed over everyone because you wanted to be reunited with your friend. Like, that needs to be called out and addressed, and it really isn't, at least in any kind of satisfying way. at least they show Sabine as like remorseful, but they don't really acknowledge how big of a fuck up this is. That she's essentially restarting the Empire. I mean, that's supposed to be the prowess of how big of a deal Thrawn is, even though this show hasn't really reflected it. Ahsoka says that Anakin stood by her always, and maybe I'm just misremembering because I haven't watched the Clone Wars in like 6 years, but I thought that at the end of the Clone Wars, like season 5 to 6, that Ahsoka is accused of betraying the Jedi or something along those lines, and then Anakin wants to bring her in for a trial, and she says, don't you believe me? And he kind of hesitates, and that's sort of what sparks her leaving the Jedi Order. Hopefully I'm not misremembering, but that's how I thought it went down. So when she says here that Anakin stood by me always, even when no one else did, it kind of feels like they're altering what happened. Sabine just apologizing to Ahsoka doesn't really make up for everything else. I mean, you're talking about a galactic scale incident. You're talking billions of lives, maybe trillions, maybe even more. So this kind of fits in with the rest of this season where people aren't properly responding to how serious things are. And we get this kind of stoic, almost bored, like it's a formality of an apology. And Ahsoka says people didn't understand the tough decisions that I made. And yeah, it is a tough decision, but she made the selfish decision to pick her reuniting with her one friend, who I guess they're just platonic now, even though Ezra was always hitting on her in Rebels, to the weight of the galaxy. And she's supposed to be a leader. I mean, we saw that at the very beginning of the season, that she's supposed to be a pretty high up figure with a lot of responsibility. So in that sense, she's a colossal failure for the amount of responsibility she's supposed to be bearing. And I don't like what they've done with Sabine this season. It's really frustrating to me. I mean, the Force stuff is obvious, but then just how kind of immature and impulsive she is and emotional. Like, she's always been somewhat emotional, but she took the responsibility for when she screwed over the Mandalorians in their Beskar armor. Like, that weighed heavily on her. So for her to make another mistake like that is really kind of a character reset. It's just not a decision that I like. There's also a line here from Ahsoka to Sabine that I really hate. Ahsoka is asking Sabine if she's kept up with her training, and Sabine says, well, she's gotten better with her lightsaber. Ahsoka says, there's more to being a Jedi than just using a lightsaber. And it's not completely contradictory, but when Obi-Wan says to Anakin, this lightsaber is your life, it's a completely different perspective. So it's just another one of those things that I just don't like how they kind of just slip that in. And then we get this scene where the two TIE fighters attack the ship. And again, consistency is just out the window. Like, we've seen repeatedly this ship get attacked, and it takes a million shots before it even gets disabled. And the engine here gets destroyed in like 2 seconds. And then Ahsoka and Ezra hold the ship up with the Force, which, fine. And then Sabine boosts the ship, and it rams into both TIE fighters, and it all blows up, and she walks away fine. It's just another one of those things where it's like they need the action scene to happen a certain way, so they just disregard the stuff that they did before. And it's frustrating because it just feels like a lack of caring for the story and the consistency in the world when you just kind of do whatever you want and then try to play it off as, well, not really a big deal, we just needed that to happen. Thrawn tells them to get ready for a ground assault. Obviously, Ezra, Sabine, and Ahsoka ride the Howlers because that's faster than just walking. And Morgan asks for volunteers to go fight, which I think is really weird because Thrawn is a very military by the book guy. So it seems to me like he could just say, hey, you guys are going to fight, and that'd be the end of it. But there's a very clear hierarchy. The fact that he did volunteers instead is just weird to me. Ezra, Sabine, and Ahsoka do essentially just a rush at the ship on these Howlers, and Thrawn says, rain hellfire upon them. I can't negotiate with the apprentice of Anakin Skywalker. And this is just another one of those scenes where I don't even know if they realize it, but they're making more and more weapons impotent in Star Wars. Like, you've got a Star Destroyer unloading on 3 people on alien dogs, and they just don't do anything. They just run through them. And it's like, well, what's the point of having a fucking Star Destroyer then? It's just like the same thing with the lightsabers, where it's like 5 people have been stabbed with them now, and none of them die. Like, at some point, it just stops being a threat. And that's kind of how this scene feels to me, because they don't get hit, they don't get wounded, they just run through and start the fight. And I guess it's supposed to be like the cool riding on a horse scene and dodging fire, but it kind of destroys, again, the world building of Star Wars. Sabine and Ezra use the Force to just force the gate open, and now Sabine is a fully fledged Mandalorian Jedi. It's just a decision that I don't understand, I don't like, and it retcons the entire Force. And people can cope and say whatever they want. It's a retcon that literally destroys the way that the Force works in the Star Wars universe. If anyone can just use it, if they have enough willpower, it might as well be Harry Potter. And even in Harry Potter, you had to be born with magical ability. So make of that what you will. They storm the gate. There's a bunch of stormtroopers here, like 50, shooting at them. And they're just deflecting bolts and blah, blah, blah. And again, I said this, I think, in every video that I've made that Ahsoka's been prominent in. She looks so slow with a lightsaber. It looks like she's just kind of hanging out and twirling it around in Walmart. And now Sabine obviously has the best car and the lightsaber that she can deflect blaster bolts with. And soon we're going to get Stormtrooper zombies, which is what I actually thought they were before. But then they actually do become the witch zombies in this one. So now it's actually a part of the story. Ezra, Ahsoka, and Sabine escape the zombies. And Thrawn asks Morgan to stay behind to buy them more time because he's worried they're going to board the ship. And now the Star Destroyer has hooked into the hyperspace ring. So they're ready to go. And he doesn't want to bring them with him. Morgan's there waiting for the three of them. Ahsoka says, "You two go and stop Thrawn, and I'll handle Morgan." And she just lets Ezra and Sabine go, which is kind of failing the buy me time mission that she was given. But whatever, at this point, obviously they want the one-on-one samurai-style duel with lightsabers, so that's just where we are. The ship is ready to go. They're on the way out back to the original galaxy, and Sabine and Ezra get their ass kicked by these two special night troopers. And we get to see Sabine lose her lightsaber and pull it toward her with the Force, which is in like every Star Wars movie, obviously. So now she's a full-blown Jedi. And again, these two troopers alone kicking the shit out of Sabine and Ezra makes it dumb that Ezra wasn't dead at any point before this. I just had to let it go because everything that happens just makes that whole premise even dumber. The ship is flying away. You can see this huge chasm. And they do the thing that they did in Rebels where Ezra force jumps and then Sabine force pushes before he falls and gets him to that lip. And if you aren't familiar with Rebels, you're probably just like, what the hell is happening right now? And Sabine is supposed to be force pulled across, but then turns around to go help Ahsoka. And this is essentially how she ends up getting left behind. And again, we have Ahsoka surrounded by stormtroopers, and you can see they're literally just standing there watching them duel instead of acting like a firing squad, which at this point, because Thrawn doesn't care if Morgan dies or gets left behind, there's no risk of shooting her, or there's no consequence to it, so they should just unload on both of them and kill them both. But, you know, she's wearing thick plot armor, so I guess fuck it. After like 5 minutes of two old ladies swinging swords around, Ahsoka eventually guts her, so she's dead. For whatever that's worth in Star Wars. I mean, Palpatine was disintegrated and came back, so who the hell knows? But she's dead. Sabine showed up and all the stormtroopers just ran away, and now she's fighting them again with no helmet because obviously we need to see her face instead of her actually wearing armor that protects her. Once again, they use the Star Destroyer to bombard the fortress, and Sabine and Ahsoka just run through it like it's no big deal. And they jump off here, and Hu Yang's there with the ship that he fixed in like an hour with no materials. And also, I forgot to mention, the choreography in that fight was an atrocity. Like, if you look at anyone who's not the main characters, there are people literally just running into Sabine without shooting until she kills them. So they have guns and they run at her, which is dumb on its own, and it's a movie thing that I cannot stand. But in this one, they're not even shooting at her. They're literally just running into her until she stabs them. It's just so lazy. I just don't understand how that happens. They chase Thrawn and the hyperspace ring, and they try to catch him before he jumps galaxies. They don't get there. Thrawn reaches out to Ahsoka to say your efforts were commendable, but you came up short, even though Ezra's on the ship. And now Ahsoka and Sabine are stuck in this other galaxy, and I guess they'll have to manipulate a whale through the Force to go home or something. I have no idea. And Thrawn says that because she was Anakin's apprentice, that he concluded their strategies might be similar, and alludes to the fact that she might become a Sith or a dark side Force user, whatever you want to say. And I'll be honest, that would be a cool line if Ahsoka had any strategy. Her strategy was literally just hope that a whale took her to the right place, and then save Sabine and Ezra, and then bum rush a Star Destroyer on a dog. So I don't know what strategy he's referring to. They definitely didn't earn the payoff for that line to be cool, which is what I think that they think it is. now that she's stuck in a different galaxy, why would she become a Sith? It doesn't really connect or make any sense at all. And also, Thrawn uses the word Ronin here to describe her, which is just fucking ridiculous. Because a Ronin is a very specific reference to essentially Japanese warriors historically. I'm not going to look up the dictionary definition, but the fact that they would have this word in Star Wars is nonsensical because they have so many other words and terms and species and all kinds of things. For them to have Ronin alluding to like a wandering ninja warrior type person is just dumb. And it's just so on the nose, which is how all of the samurai shit this season has been. We get another reference here to the Clone Wars and Rebels. I'm not going to go into the whole episode, but in the Clone Wars, there was essentially this arc on a planet where the Force was like created. And it was definitely one of my least favorite parts of the Clone Wars, where you have this dad who's at the neutral part of the Force, a daughter who's the light side, and a son who's the dark side. And the daughter sacrifices herself and turns into an owl, if I remember correctly. And this owl is always kind of watching over Ahsoka. And the owl shows up in Rebels also when Darth Vader should have killed her. So that's a little nod to this here. Why this owl is in another galaxy, why they would slip this in when a fraction of a percentage of people would know about it, no clue. Maybe it's just an Easter egg, so it's not a big deal. But they put it in there, so I wanted to at least mention it. Here is Shin, who did not appear in the finale, did not have an arc this season, don't know shit about her. She holds her lightsaber up to these bandits who I guess are just the red shirt bad guys. And this kind of looks like it's supposed to be a shot of Mordor or something, which based on the other references in this season, I'm assuming it's deliberate. But she holds up her lightsaber, and I guess she's in charge of the bandits now, is the implication. Her entire character, and I'm using the word character very loosely, is just nonsense. Like, can anyone tell anything about Shin other than the fact that people want to fucking jack off to her on Reddit? Like, she has not really said much. She's not really done much. The only thing that we know is that she's supposed to kill Sabine and Ahsoka, and she was an apprentice for Baylan, but we don't know what she wants. We don't know her goals. It's alluded to that she was a Force user after Order 66, so Baylan took her in, but we don't know jack shit about her. So maybe this would be a cool scene if she had some kind of goal or desire or character development, but instead it's just like, oh, maybe they forgot about her, so they just shot this and then added this scene on to the end of the fucking season. That's kind of what it feels like, because we don't know anything about her or what she wants. So this scene is just a waste, and her whole character was a waste. They did nothing with her. And here we get the end of Baylan's story, and this is the father of Mortis. So Mortis, just to sum up, is the planet where the Force was pretty much created, which is why I wasn't a fan of this in the Clone Wars. I always viewed the Force as something that just existed. But anyway, the center figure with the hand out with Baylan on it is the father. The son is to the right. And in the Clone Wars episode, the daughter sacrificed herself, funds Ahsoka. The father sacrificed himself, and the son came to his senses because he's the dark side, and Anakin killed him, is the gist of it. And again, we get another just on-the-nose Lord of the Rings rip-off reference. Obviously, the end of the Fellowship of the Ring, they are in the little canoe between the two statues that look just like this. So this is all just kind of nonsense, honestly. And Baylan, Ray Stevenson died right after shooting, which is obviously sad. And it's a huge bummer because he was the only person who seemed to know how to act in this show. So I don't know if maybe they altered this ending a little bit, but he had no lines and we don't know what he wanted. And again, he's another character that he was kind of vague and mysterious, but at some point you have to know what he wants and who he is to give a shit. And we get this ending for him, which now, who knows what they're going to do with it. I'm assuming they're going to recast, but who knows? And even if they do recast, none of this means anything. It's all just designed so that people will speculate about it and kind of fill in the blanks for the writers because they don't even know what they're going to do themselves. So it's really frustrating to see the main two antagonists for the season just vanish for the finale. We still don't know anything about them. And now they're just kind of there. Really frustrating and just a really bad way to do a show. Like, obviously, when you do a TV series as opposed to a movie, you want to have stuff that's unfinished so that you can do another season. But there has to be an arc in each season and progress and development so that each season feels like its own story, but it's not quite concluded. And this one feels like they don't know what they're going to do. They just wanted to leave a bunch of shit open-ended. And now, who knows? They don't even know. There was no development. There was no arc. This entire season could have been accomplished in probably 2 hours instead of 7 or whatever we ended up at. Probably 6. It's just ridiculous. Thrawn goes straight to Dathomir, and they have like 1,000 coffins. And I'm assuming that these coffins are Dathomir corpses for the witches, and that's the deal that they made with Thrawn. So they're going to try to repopulate Dathomir is kind of what it seems like is happening. Here you can see all the coffins, and then they say one of the shuttles fled, and this is obviously Ezra because he was on board for the entire hyperspace trip, and I guess they just didn't do anything about it. Ezra's back. Chopper recognizes him, so he says, hey to Hera, I'm home. And they left everything unfinished and no arcs so that they can just keep this shit going, which I'll be honest, I think it's like 50-50 if they keep this show going or not. So we get one more scene of Sabine and Ahsoka talking, and Ahsoka tells her that she did well, which I just do not understand when her entire goal was to prevent them bringing Thrawn back to the main galaxy, even if it cost them Ezra. And she even blamed herself for not training Sabine well enough to make that tough decision. And I guess now that they're just going to hang out with the crab people, and then we finally come to the end with this super drawn out scene, and they are getting their money's worth out of Hayden in this season. They brought him back for the end of an episode. They brought him back for a little Clone Wars cameo and the World Between Worlds, if that's what it was. They brought him back with a hologram, and now he's a Force ghost. So they're just getting everything they can out of him in this season. So that's it for this season of Ahsoka. This finale was really underwhelming. No characters really had any development. The only goals were don't let Thrawn come back and let's get Thrawn back. And that was fulfilled, but no one really seems to give a shit. We exchanged Shin, Baylan, Ahsoka, Sabine for Ezra and Thrawn. So now they're on this planet in another galaxy, and Thrawn and Ezra are back in the main galaxy. Yeah, it's really disappointing. I'm not sure what else to say about it. Even Rebels, for all its flaws, each season had a purpose, and they understood having an overarching thing going on. At the first season, it was the Inquisitors and Ezra becoming a Jedi. The third season, you brought Thrawn in. He tried to capture the Rebels, and he ended up destroying their base, and he caught Callus as a traitor. And Ezra had his arc with the dark side and going back to just the light side. So overall, this was just really a flat show. I couldn't tell you anything about Shin or Baylan other than they're supposed to be mysterious. Hera, her part didn't even need to be in this show. Jason was introduced. Again, he was literally just there to hear the lightsaber duel between Ahsoka and Anakin in her head. Sabine just served to fuck everything up. Ahsoka just kind of along for the ride. Ezra was just kind of chilling and being a hippie. And now he's back in the main galaxy. And this show, I think I've said this in like 3 or 4 videos, but it really would have served this show very well to do like a 20-minute flashback of Clone Wars stuff and Rebels stuff of live action, just to give people a clue as to what's going on. Because if you're a normie and you haven't watched Rebels, you haven't watched Clone Wars, well, either one really. If you haven't watched Clone Wars, you don't really understand Ahsoka's significance. If you haven't watched Rebels, you probably have no clue why Thrawn is supposed to be intimidating. He just kind of shows up and does basic bitch stuff. So yeah, this finale was a colossal letdown. Even for this show's standards, I thought it would at least give us some insight into what people wanted. And instead, they killed Morgan. Ahsoka and Sabine are hanging out with hermit crabs. Ezra and Thrawn went home. And now we're just kind of chilling. And we all know that this leads to the First Order. So you would think that they would have taken some strides toward that. And instead we got probably 6.5 hours of while Thrawn made his way back now. And character-wise, we got nothing. So I don't have much else to say about it. This video went way longer than I wanted it to. I think I might do a full season review and kind of just a meta. I think I might do a meta video on whether or not this kind of thing can bring Star Wars back to the mainstream. Because just at a glance, the answer is no. I cannot imagine anyone who wasn't already a huge Clone Wars and Rebels fan would enjoy this show. And I actually liked both. Well, Clone Wars was up and down. Rebels, I liked overall. And there's no way that this show appealed to anyone who wasn't already a hardcore fan. And if you're wanting Star Wars to become big again, it needs to make money and get viewers. And this type of show is just not going to cut it. But I don't want to keep going. That's it for me for this one. If you're still here, like and subscribe and all that shit. Thanks. See ya.